In the year 1885, in the mountains of Lebanon, a Maronite monk named Charbel Makhlouf received 3 visitors at the monastery of Annaya. They came seeking spiritual counsel, but what he revealed to them were not words of comfort. It was a method, an ancient path, a way to see what had always been present, but invisible to the eyes of flesh. He told them that certain chosen souls could, through prayer and severe fasting, cross the veil of matter and contemplate while still alive the powers of darkness that circulate among men, the Archons, the Principalities, the forces that St. Paul warned were not of flesh and blood. But I ask, what happens when a man sees with his own eyes that which should remain hidden? This is not a modern account. It is not fantasy. It is a testimony preserved by generations of Lebanese monks, transmitted in silence, kept as a warning. Saint Charbel, known for his holiness and for miracles that defy reason, would have taught a small group of disciples to discern not only spirits but to see their forms. And the price of that vision was extremely high. Before continuing, I ask that you subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. This work depends on you. Also, write in the comments where you are watching this video from. Now, let us enter the silence of the mountains of Lebanon, where it all began. Charbel Makhlouf was born in 1828 in Bekar Kafra, a remote village in the heights of Mount Lebanon. From his youth, he felt the call to solitude. At 23 years of age, he entered the Lebanese Maronite order. He lived in absolute enclosure for more than 50 years. He celebrated Mass in tears. He slept on stones. He ate only bread and herbs. The peasants said that around his cell the air was different, heavier, purer, as if the natural world bowed before his presence. Charbel did not speak much, but when he spoke, his words pierced the soul. He knew the secret thoughts of men. He saw beyond the visible. And this was not empty mystical gift, it was constant spiritual combat. In the autumn of 1885, 3 men climbed the mountain to Annaya. They were merchants from Beirut, devout Catholics, but tormented. They reported nocturnal disturbances, disturbing visions, sensation of hostile presence. They sought exorcism, blessing, relief. Charbel received them in silence. He observed them at length. Then he said something unexpected. "You do not need deliverance. You need discernment." The men did not understand. Charbel explained that not all spiritual oppression is possession. There is another reality, an invisible web of powers that circulate among men, influencing wills, obscuring reason, inciting vices. St. Paul called these forces principalities and powers. The Church Fathers named them Archons, entities that govern the darkness of this world. Charbel warned, "Most men live blind to this war, and that is mercy. But some are called to see, to intercede, to combat. But to see is also to suffer, because once the eyes are opened, they do not close again." The 3 men asked if he himself had seen. Charbel lowered his eyes and answered only, "Yes, and I pay the price every day." Then he offered them a path. It was not a secret ritual. It was not magic. It was rigorous ascetic discipline. 40 days of absolute fasting on bread and water, prayer of the hours without interruption, weekly confession, total silence, complete renunciation of one's own will. And on the 40th day after Eucharistic communion, they should remain in vigil until dawn, in contemplative prayer. Charbel warned them again, "If you do this, you will see. But I cannot promise that you will endure what you will see. Not all eyes are made to contemplate the darkness, and once seen, the soul is marked. Are you certain you desire this?" The 3 men, moved by fervor and also by spiritual pride, answered yes. Charbel nodded, and the instruction began. During the 40 days, the men remained at the monastery. They fasted rigorously. They prayed without ceasing. Charbel visited them once a week to hear confession and observe their progress. He said little, but his eyes examined deeply, as if he were measuring the resistance of souls. On the 20th day, one of the men gave up. He said he could not endure any more. Charbel blessed him and let him leave. The other 2 remained. Their bodies grew thin. Their faces became pale, but their eyes gained a strange intensity. On the 40th day, after receiving the Eucharist from Charbel's hands, They were led to a small side chapel. There they knelt before the most blessed sacrament exposed. Charbel said only, "Remain, do not be afraid, and do not turn your eyes from the host." He left. The two men were alone. Hours passed in absolute silence. Night fell. Only the lamplight flickered before the monstrance. Then one of them began to perceive something strange. In the shadows on the walls, shapes began to move. They were not natural shadows. They were figures, vague outlines, elongated forms, dense presence. He tried to scream, but could not. The other man also saw. He described later as deformed human silhouettes, too tall, too thin, with disproportionate limbs. They circulated through the chapel, but never approached the Blessed Sacrament, as if there were an invisible limit. They made no sound, but their presence was oppressive, heavy, like dense air before a storm. The men felt absolute terror, but they did not flee. They kept their eyes on the host. Hours later, at dawn, Charbel returned. He found the two men prostrate on the floor, pale, trembling. He helped them rise. He led them outside. He gave them bread and water. He waited for them to recover speech. Finally, one of them asked, "Father, what were those things?" Charbel answered calmly, "You saw what has always been there, the guardians of darkness, those who circulate among men." He explained that these entities are not demons in the common sense. They are inferior powers, subordinate spirits. Their function is to obscure reason, inflame passions, draw souls away from God. They do not possess bodies, but can be seen by souls purified through fasting and prayer. Charbel said, "You saw them because you became transparent. Fasting purified your interior eyes." The men asked if they should fear these creatures. Charbel answered, "No, they have no power over one who is in a state of grace. That is why they did not approach the Blessed Sacrament. That is why you remained protected while you kept your eyes on the host. The Eucharist is absolute barrier. They can circulate, but they cannot cross where Christ is present." Then he made a grave warning. "But now that you have seen, you will always see, not at every moment, but on certain occasions, when a soul is under great oppression, when a place is marked by grave sin, when there is imminent spiritual danger, your eyes have been opened. And this is both gift and burden. Use this discernment to intercede, never to judge." The two men returned to Beirut transformed. They never spoke publicly about what they saw. But their families noticed profound change. They became men of constant prayer. They attended Mass daily. They confessed regularly. And occasionally, in specific places or situations, their faces became pale, as if they saw something others did not see. And then they prayed in silence. One of them, years later, reported to his confessor that he had seen these forms on 3 specific occasions: during a violent argument between neighbors, in a house where there was secret adultery, and in a tavern where men gambled and blasphemed. Always the same silhouettes, always circulating, always motionless when he prayed. The confessor recorded the testimony, and the archive remained kept at the monastery. Charbel never taught this method to anyone else. When asked, he answered that few were called to such, and that the danger was great. Many would seek this vision out of curiosity, others out of spiritual pride, and both motives would lead to ruin. He said, "To see is not privilege, it is cross. Whoever desires to carry this cross without being called falls under its weight." There is a record that Charbel, shortly before his death in 1898, said to a brother monk, "For 50 years I see them daily. They circulate everywhere, in markets, in churches, in houses, in the hearts of men. But where there is true prayer, they retreat. Where there is Eucharist, they flee. Where there is sincere charity, they do not enter. Therefore, I repeat, the weapon is always the same: prayer, fasting, sacrament." Now it is necessary to ask, what does this mean theologically? The Church has always taught the existence of angelic hierarchies, and, by inverted symmetry, demonic hierarchies. St. Paul was clear: our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against the rulers of this dark world in Ephesians 6:12. Charbel's vision does not contradict doctrine, it confirms it. The Church Fathers, especially those of the desert, spoke frequently of these realities. St. Anthony of the Desert saw demons visibly. St. John Cassian described spiritual attacks with physical form. St. Catherine of Siena had similar visions. The difference is that Charbel taught a specific ascetic method to purify perception, not as an end, but as a means of more conscious spiritual combat. But the Church has also always warned against the deliberate seeking of these experiences. The Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches that we must trust in divine protection without demanding visible signs. Faith does not depend on visions. The danger lies in transforming spiritual life into spectacle, or in seeking power over spirits, which is dangerously close to magic. Charbel knew this. That is why he was so cautious. The deepest truth of this account is not in the vision itself. It is in the answer Charbel gave when the men asked what to do after seeing. He said, "Nothing special. Pray more, fast more, love more. The vision does not change the path. It only makes the enemy visible. But the combat is the same. It always was the same. Humble prayer, obedience, charity. There is no other path." This brings us to the universal question. You who hear these words do not need to see these forms to know that spiritual battle is real. You have already felt temptation. You have already experienced interior oppression. You have already perceived that certain situations carry inexplicable spiritual weight. This is not imagination. It is the reality of the invisible war that Paul described. And you are already in it, seeing or not. The question is not whether you will see the Archons with the eyes of flesh. The question is whether you are spiritually armed to resist them. And the weapons are simple: constant prayer, frequent sacrament, disciplined fasting, obedience to the Church, sincere charity. Charbel did not teach occult secret. He taught the ancient path, the path of the saints, the path that always worked and always will work. There is a final detail in the testimony of the two men. They said that after the experience, they never again felt fear of demons. Paradoxically, seeing the darkness freed them from fear of the darkness, because they also saw the impotence of these forces before the Blessed Sacrament. They saw that where Christ is, they do not enter, and they understood that the presence of God is absolute protection. This brought deep peace. Charbel died in 1898, during the celebration of Mass. He fell before the altar, holding the chalice. He was buried without a coffin, as was the custom of the order. But his body did not decompose. For months, a mysterious light appeared over his tomb. When they exhumed the body, they found it intact, exhaling perfume. The miracles began, and they continue to this day. He was canonized in 1977. His tomb in Annaya became a place of pilgrimage. Thousands of people visit annually. There are reports of inexplicable healings, profound conversions, spiritual liberations, but few know the teaching about the Archons, because it was transmitted in silence, among few as warning and method reserved for the called. This account survived in monastic archives, preserved by generations. What to do with this information? First, do not seek mystical experience out of curiosity. Second, recognize the reality of spiritual battle without paralyzing fear. Third, strengthen yourself with the ordinary means that the Church offers: Mass, confession, prayer, fasting. Fourth, trust absolutely in the protection of the Eucharist. Where Christ is, darkness has no power. There is a phrase attributed to Charbel, recorded by close witnesses: "The devil has less power than men imagine, but men have less vigilance than they should have." The problem is not the strength of the enemy, it is the weakness of prayer. This phrase summarizes all spiritual wisdom. Victory does not come from seeing the enemy, it comes from remaining firm in grace. And this is within reach of all. Another important point: Charbel never encouraged fear. On the contrary, he said that the greatest deception of the devil is to make himself appear more powerful than he is. The reality is that any soul in a state of grace, however simple, has infinitely greater power than any demon, because it carries within itself the presence of God. Therefore, spiritual combat is waged in humility, not in direct confrontation. There is also an important pastoral aspect. If someone claims to see these spiritual forms, the Church recommends rigorous discernment. It may be authentic mystical experience. It may be psychological illusion. It may be diabolic temptation in disguise. Therefore, such experiences must always be submitted To an experienced spiritual director, never act alone. Never trust only one's own perception. Charbel lived in absolute obedience. He never acted on his own. He never proclaimed himself a seer or mystic. When extraordinary phenomena occurred, he reported to his superior and awaited guidance. This humility is authentic mark of holiness. Any spiritual experience that inflates the ego or creates independence is suspect. The true mystic becomes smaller, not greater, more dependent, not less. Now breathe deeply. This account may have caused disquiet. It is natural. But remember, you are protected. If you are in a state of grace, if you frequent the sacraments, if you pray with sincerity, no power of darkness has power over you. Saint Charbel did not teach to fear. He taught to watch. And vigilance is expressed in fidelity to the ordinary means of sanctification. Think of your own life. Where have you permitted spiritual entry through habitual sins? Where have you neglected prayer? Where have you avoided confession? These are the real breaches. It is not necessary to see Archons to know that they work in these breaches. Close them. Through sincere conversion, through true repentance, through return to the sacraments. This is effective spiritual combat. Saint Charbel spent 50 years in solitude, but his solitude was constant combat. He fought not only for himself, but for all souls. He offered his prayers, his fasts, his tears in reparation for the sins of the world. This is the vocation of contemplatives. They do not flee the world. They enter the deepest spiritual battle, and their invisible victories resound in visible graces for all. You are also called to this, not necessarily to monastic life, but to conscious spiritual combat where you are, in your family, in your work, in your relationships. Each sincere prayer is victory against the darkness. Each act of charity is light that disperses them. Each Eucharistic communion is impenetrable fortress. You already have everything you need. The question is whether you will use these weapons or let them rust. There is a tradition among the monks of Annaya. They say that Charbel, before dying, foresaw that the world would enter a period of great spiritual confusion, where good would be called evil and evil good, where darkness would present itself as light, and that in that time it would be necessary to return to basics: simple prayer, firm faith, humble obedience, total trust in the mercy of God. We do not know if this prophecy is authentic, but we know the counsel is wise. In times of spiritual confusion, we do not seek extraordinary experiences. We seek ordinary fidelity, Sunday Mass, daily rosary, nightly examination of conscience, spiritual reading, works of mercy. These simple things are chains of steel that no power of darkness can break. Saint Charbel taught the chosen ones to see the Archons, but he taught everyone to overcome them. And victory is not in the vision, it is in perseverance, in daily fidelity, in unshakable trust that Christ has already won, and that, united to him, we participate in that victory. We do not need to see the enemy to know he is defeated. It is enough to remain in grace, and grace flows from the sacraments. So while these words still echo in your mind, make a choice, not the choice to seek visions, but the choice to strengthen your spiritual life. Return to confession if you are distant. Resume frequent communion. Pray the rosary tonight. Fast this week. Read the scriptures. Do a work of charity. These are the weapons. Use them. And trust that Saint Charbel intercedes for you. May the peace of Christ, which surpasses all understanding, guard your heart and your mind. May the intercession of Saint Charbel protect you in the invisible battle. May the light of the Eucharist dispel all darkness around you. And may you never forget, where the grace of God is, the powers of darkness have no place. Amen. Now, I don't have very good news. I truly love creating these videos, but they take a lot of work, and the only way I can continue is by reaching 1,000 subscribers, because that's when I can start earning from YouTube. If you enjoy our videos, please don't let this channel disappear. Subscribe to the channel and share our videos.